Hello out there and welcome. Thrilled to have everyone on and listening and to have a great group joining me for this discussion. I'd like to thank the team at Buxton for putting on what should be a great event and a great discussion. Well organized from the jump, which is greatly appreciated. I'm Miles Bloom. I'm a principal at BizNow Media, and I oversee our growth and development efforts across the US, Canada, the UK, and Ireland. I'm thrilled to be joined by a stellar group who I'm going to take a couple seconds to introduce. First, we have Norman Barnum, who serves as the Chief Financial Officer at the New Orleans Business Alliance, an economic development organization that partners with city government to attract and support businesses, develop talent and workforce, and strengthen sense of place. In his role, Norman develops overall financial strategy and implementation of data systems. He manages a finance team, treasury, shareholder relations, accounting, tax, external audit, and risk management. Also leads development and implementation of strategic initiatives that increase the organization's self-sustainability and minimize dependence on public funding. Norman serves as liaison between leaders in the public and private sectors and community members to generate outcomes that drive prosperity for all citizens of New Orleans. Norman, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, Miles. Look, I like that guy that you introduced. I am Norman Barnum, the Chief Financial Officer of the New Orleans Business Alliance. Looking forward to the discussion today that we're going to have to drive economic outcomes post-pandemic and where we find ourselves right now. Really ready to be engaged with everybody that's on the webinar and looking forward to a large discourse of ideals and innovations as we move forward.
Excellent. Thanks, Norman. I'd also like to introduce Ivy Greaner, who's the Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President at Bedrock, Detroit, where she leads the company's day-to-day administrative and operational functions, ensuring a seamless experience for visitors, residents, and tenants. Since its founding, Bedrock and its affiliates have invested and committed more than $5.6 billion to acquiring and developing more than 100 properties, including some of the most significant new developments Detroit and Cleveland have seen in decades. Bedrock's portfolio totals more than 18 million square feet of office, retail, and residential space within new construction and adaptive reuse projects. Ivy's career as a real estate executive investment leader spans more than 35 years, including broad experience in retail, commercial, and multifamily sectors nationwide. She's been responsible for operating and growing large portfolios of real estate investments in multiple capital stacks, as well as ground-up development for single and mixed-use product types and all company operations. Ivy, thank you so much for being here today. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me too. That sounds so impressive. I'm most excited to be on the panel with the rest of you guys, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Thanks, Ivy. And our final panelist, Chris Briggs, is a Senior Vice President with Buxton, where he leads cross-functional initiatives that support Buxton's work in the public sector and the commercial real estate industry. Since joining the company in 2003, Chris has held leadership positions in operations, in product development, marketing, client experience, and sales, including as a consultant to Buxton's retail and healthcare clients. Chris, thanks so much for participating in our discussion, and a huge shout out to you and the entire Buxton team for putting together a great event. Looking forward to diving in.
Thank you very much, Miles. Norman, Ivy, thank you both for being here today. It's good to see you both again, and I look forward to the conversation.
Excellent. So everyone's been introduced. I think we can dive into discussion, and I think we'll start with a question toward Norman and Ivy. You know, this discussion is built around economic recovery and a way forward. And if we're talking about economic recovery, that often means taking a look back to see where we were before we can talk about where we're going. So before the pandemic, I'd love to hear from each of you about the state of the local economy in your cities, New Orleans and Detroit, what projects and initiatives you and your organizations were pursuing in that time.
Hey, Chris, I'll take it and start with it. Post-pandemic, 2019 was one of the most expansive years for our tourism and hospitality industry. That was really driven by the opening of our billion-dollar airport. We saw close to 17 million visitors that came through the city, and it really punctuated the New Orleans experience. Our restaurant hospitality sectors were booming, conventions were booming, And so we were in a really good place before the pandemic hit. And I believe that we're going to move back towards that as you know, the pandemic and the vaccines intersect with consumer demand again. But it's a ride to get back to where we were. But 2019 was one of our bellwether years, and we're looking forward to riding that crest again.
I will add to that.
Sorry.
I'll add to that for Detroit. So Detroit has been in a generational change for about the last 10 years. And so it was probably at, it was a very robust point in its incarnation with nowhere to go but up, continued rise. I think the pandemic will prove to be a pause, but everybody's been very excited about Detroit and the shift that was made in the last 10 years. So unlike other cities which may be more cyclical now, you know, Norman talked about having also a very specific shift because of airports, et cetera. I do think that this was a pause in where Detroit's going.
So last March, you know, with the advent of COVID-19, the pandemic, to put it lightly, right, it was a curveball that no one expected. We didn't have a playbook, and so, you know, a lot of communities around the country use a lot of different tactics to respond and try and stabilize things and right course. So I'm curious, as you kind of look back to that initial stretch last March and in the weeks and months early on in the pandemic, what tactics did you or other local leaders use that worked well? And what are some of the challenges that arose that your communities are still facing today?
Yeah, Miles, at the Business Alliance, once March 9th hit and the world stopped as we knew it, we made a decision by March 16th to engage our community in what we call the Gig Economy Fund. And it was at that point, my senior leadership and myself decided to put $100,000 of our own unrestricted money into a fund and challenge our colleagues and our other funders to match it, to try to raise money to put assistance on the street quickly. And so we pivoted from convener to direct assistance quickly. And I believe at that moment, clearly the level of desperation in this city I had never seen. This is a city that's built on commerce and vitality and interaction. And so the pandemic shut all of that down and shut down livelihoods quickly. And the government was not able to pivot as quickly to give the resources necessary. But as a public-private partnership, we were able to make that pivot a little faster to bring the resources to our community members. And for that, I think it gave us a real indication of the strength of the gig economy worker, how vital that worker is to our secret sauce in New Orleans. And then it gave rise to some of the inherent weaknesses of having an over-reliance on hospitality and tourism all at once. So it was an interesting dynamic, one that I'm very appreciative of my colleagues that were able to make that pivot so quickly and be able to meet the moment as it was required.
Ivy, how about in Detroit?
Yeah, so for us, we're very unique, not only I think in this state or country, but in the world, because you really have a single investor who owns about 70% of Detroit and is largely responsible for the lift, along with the constituents, of course, but largely responsible financially for the lift of the city in the last 10 years. And so he was also uniquely positioned to be able to help residents and tenants alike We had a very strategic program with the retail tenants, most especially with restaurants and retailers who were hit hard and fast. And so to be able to come up with a kind of a global program for them to keep going was within his grasp and within the company's grasp because of how the portfolio is capitalized. And so that was very unique and gave most of the residents and tenants the ability to kind of power through to a certain extent. So we actually haven't had a huge loss of businesses within the city. There have been some, but not a lot considering, what has gone on throughout the country. And the ability to continue to work one-on-one with each one of our tenants, I believe, has also been pretty unique.
Interesting. So Chris, I mean, from your seat, Buxton has such incredible visibility nationwide. I'm curious, what you think about what Norman and Ivy just touched on, and how the circumstances and solutions laid out in New Orleans and Detroit compared to other communities across the country that Buxton works with.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's really interesting, Miles, in Norman and Ivy is that working with larger cities, like New Orleans, like working in Detroit, the thing that I've learned over the years is a lot of people categorize large cities like that as a whole other beast compared to some mid-sized communities and townships. And what I've discovered is the fundamentals apply across the board. And I think that New Orleans Business Alliance, I've seen it firsthand pre-pandemic. I think it was one of the last business trips I took, Norman, in February of 2020 was with you, and y'all were hosting. And this is key. It's the spirit of it, is hosting an event where you are really getting close to the stakeholders and really disseminating information, keeping people aware of what's going on. And I think that's one of the strong things that y'all did, and what a lot of the other cities I get an opportunity to work with, the ones that have really powered through this, have done. They kept communicating, they kept sharing information, they kept marshaling resources, they stayed competitive. Ivy, one of the things that you said that I found really interesting is also one of the best practices, that one-to-one communication. So y'all have done it, Bedrock Detroit's done it with your tenants, and you got really creative to go out and work with them through this very, very challenging, unique time. You shared the burden, you shared, and you looked past the immediate and saw on the horizon a point where y'all would be back on track, and wanted to make sure everybody came along. As many people came along and were at that point on the horizon when the time was right, and that too. So just partnering and enabling with your stakeholders, that's key. And I've seen a lot of people do that during this past 15 months or so that we've been at this, and that's been really encouraging. I think as a whole we have weathered it better than we thought we would at the beginning. So that's my perspective.
Something I'm curious about. Norman, in New Orleans case, I think of the recovery from Katrina. Ivy, Detroit's steady recovery and renaissance that's been happening over the course of the last few decades. I even think of a lot of the conversations that we were hosting. I mean, we were hosting tons of webinars all over the country last year, but I remember a lot of folks in New York recalling the path of 9/11. And one of the things I'm curious about is, if a city, a community, a citizen base, local businesses, if folks have an element of experience dealing with unforeseen issues and recovering from them, what sort of role does that play in a situation like this? How valuable is that experience in establishing a path forward when we get a total curveball, and you've essentially recovered from them before?
Yeah, Miles, that's a great point. And speaking for New Orleans and South Louisiana, the residents of New Orleans Parish, being able to persevere after Katrina as a rally point for the community has been, and in some regards, we're still through that recovery period with Katrina. But it does give rise to the fact that the experience of overcoming a moment is already embedded in our community. And so we did have something to hold on to, or experience to hold on to, that better days are ahead. I think what happened with this particular curveball, which is so different, is we weren't able to be together. And that instance of what the essence of New Orleans is, how we share and how we love one another. And that was taken away as a part of the pandemic. And so the spirit of the city and some of our heartbeat, we took the hit on, but it's coming back. And I think what we all can rely upon now, and it's funny, there's certain moments or certain symbols in a city that strike the chord that says we're back. And we're heading towards a September with our schools to be reopened, with our beloved saints with anticipated 100% capacity in the dome, and then the re-engagement of our festival season, which is bedrock for a lot of New Orleanians why we are here. We are able to engage all of the strengths of New Orleans in these banners and these events. And I do think that finally we have that hopeful moment that is in front of us that says that we're going to do it again. And I think this moment means that we have to do it again differently. And I think that's the thing that I would want to make sure that as we move past this particular episode in our history, that when we reconvene the next time and we look at the best practice or the way to move our economy forward, it's with a lens and a new imagination.
Mm-hmm. I mean, Ivy, how about on your end? I mean, with the incredible effort, a lot of amazing things happening in Detroit over the last few years. Does that element of being in a state of recovery give you, I don't want to say a leg up, but maybe a roadmap for how to get through a stretch like we've had these last 14, 15 months?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any of us who've been in the real estate business, we've been through savings and loan crisis and, the Great Depression, right? All of that. And the difference between, because they're all a little bit different, whatever downturns we go through for our individual economies, whether it's real estate or businesses, there are always new takeaways. You're always learning. But knowing that whatever we go through is temporary is a good thing. Now, temporary could be in a year, temporary could mean 3 years. In this instance, this happened fast. We all shut down fast. And I think because we've all been through things before, there were many of us that just knew how to react. There were many people who reacted in very similar ways. And so that was a good thing within our business because there wasn't anybody, we all had the right instincts in terms of how to work with our tenants, how to make sure we didn't approach it as we're just shutting down the world and sorry, if you don't pay me rent tomorrow, you're out of business. And so the speed and the velocity of this compared to 2007 was incredible to be able to react, put systems in place, work with your tenants, the mom and pops and the nationals. Being able to do that was a testament to everybody across the country, frankly, across the world. So I think those were all really, really good things. And I don't think we expected, the speed of the federal government. There's good things that have come out of the money flow and not so great things, right? Be careful of unintended consequences. For example, we have serious staffing issues in many of our retail and restaurant businesses today. However, because of the speed of everybody at every level, the money flowed in a very different way than it did in past downturns. And so a lot of what has happened has become the story of the have and have nots. The amount of businesses that are still looking for new businesses in second generation space, the spigot never stopped. It slowed, but it never stopped. That's been pretty stunning. But there's also people who haven't been able to recover entirely so that they can reach a point where now they can lift. But it's clear that here in Detroit and other cities I've seen, everybody is pent up. They're ready to come back. They're ready to live life to the fullest. They're ready to shop, eat, and dine. This has been going on so long. There's a bit of, you know, everything be damned, we're just getting out there and we're running our businesses, and customers are getting out there to shop and eat and drink and to live and to rent apartments. And so it's, you know, I still think we have a ways to go. You know, office will still figure itself out as the whole office community has changed how to look at business. Not everybody has to be in the office 5 days a week anymore. So I still think we have a couple of interesting years ahead of us, but it's definitely on the upswing. The interesting things are on the upswing.
Miles, the one thing I would want to add is, sorry about that, is just what's interesting to me is we're talking about drawing from experience, and really you survive it, you build up some resiliency, you know, you have some better instincts. We've got a whole cross-generational workforce right now, every sector of our economy that's just been through something that the next time we're challenged with something, I think we're going to be in a really strong position. I mean, we've kind of built some institutional memory now of how to come together and weather a storm, and this was a really, really big one. So next economic downturn, the next time we're approached with challenges, I mean, I think we just see an ability to work creatively, and there's a million case studies to draw from over the past year or so here, and that's a positive, I think.
Well, I don't think we could have scripted a better segue into starting to look forward and talking about what needs to happen from here. For those watching, like we literally could not have scripted your answers better. So as we look ahead, right, the big question now is how to help local economies rebuild. So to everyone on the panel, I'd be curious to hear you, opine and elaborate on some of the steps that you'd like to see local leaders, both public and private, take to help economies and communities rebound, recapture momentum from early 19 and build forward.
Miles, from my perspective, for sure, with the pandemic laid bare was, our lack of diversification in our industry mix. And, we need to get back to the strength of our hospitality and tourism, but we need to grow in other areas. And I would want to make sure that we take this moment to look at New Orleans through the lens of 2030 and beyond. And what does that mean for us? There are certain sectors that make sense. We've got a grant with JP Morgan Chase that's tied to advancing cities, green, renewable jobs, trying to pivot some of our workforce towards those jobs and a supply chain that's associated with it, and really diversify our economy in a way that plays to our strengths with hospitality, but also plays to some of the other strengths that we have. Orleans Parish is residence to 6 universities, 2 medical schools. We have a vibrant, what I feel, a bio district that's moving forward with. So we have some opportunities, and these could be some generational opportunities. And I think now is the time that the type of investment that is required to yield the returns in those opportunities that we really step forward into and lean into in a different manner. And that's not to look at our hospitality and tourism sector and say, we can move past that. We never can move past that. That is part and parcel of what makes New Orleans unique and why people want to come. But that diversification and a systemic stop for those workers is also required too. And I think that's what the pandemic gave rise to. And I'm looking forward to having that dialogue and that discussion with all of our stakeholders.
Chris, Ivy, how about on your end, some of the things you'd like to see from public and private leaders in local communities?
Well, we seem to keep going in order. So Chris, why don't you go next?
Break it up a little bit. Okay. I think one of the big things I would like to see carried forward, this notion of economic development is placemaking. Economic development that placemaking is an infrastructure. It's an asset. It is the thing that binds people and talent. It helps you retain the people that you have. It helps you attract people from all over the country and all over the world to come be a part of that community. So that placemaking, that's something that we saw, you know, bubbling up over the past decade, really starting to take traction over the past 3-4 years. But I think it became really vitally important during the pandemic, as we saw people able to move anywhere they wanted to go, like you, Miles. You know, just that freedom to choose where you want to go, and put your roots down. And so I know for Detroit, that's extremely important in the resurgence that you've had there. Norman, I know from speaking with you in the past, that's extremely important. And that's what you're talking about. You're talking about the talent to diversify your local economy. That is something I think that I want to see carry forward. I'm hopeful to see carry forward. And I see leading cities really taking the reins of that. So economic development, taking ownership of placemaking.
So I guess what I would add is to what Norman and Chris have already said is going forward, we still need to pay attention to industries which are continually fluctuating. I think that, again, velocity has been a key to everything that's happened in this last pandemic. The acceleration of online buying, right? Like, and the consumers have moved so fast. We thought online shopping and online services, even seeing your doctors, even seeing all kinds of things, has changed dramatically and quickly. We thought it was a long road to climb, and that's changed dramatically and quickly. What we've also done is taking the consumer for any of those and gone from, we're so excited that we have the ability to be online, to talk to each other virtually, right? So as much as it was difficult that we all went home, can you imagine what it would have been like without video? I know we're all ready to throw this stuff in the toilet, but what it would have been like without this, right? Like, even just, so conference calls are great, but having video to be able to see each other was a game changer for all of us. So there's been, but now we're all ready to go back. Like, after the first 2 weeks, we were like, oh, maybe this is okay. We were in a rush to get back, and then it was like kind of nice to be home and embrace our families and do all that stuff. And now it's like, okay, we love our families, but we need to get out of the house. So quickly, how that's worked for online business, how it's worked for what we want to do in the office. Because for a while, people were saying, we'll never have to use an office again. But you get to a point where it's like, oh no, we need to see the people that we work with and have some kind of FaceTime. There's still this evolutionary shift. So what we have to do is we have to stay open-minded. We have to listen. We have to be willing to be creative. Business from all aspects has been very consistent, and there haven't been fast changes like this in a very long time, like the Industrial Revolution. And so this is our fast changes, and I think that ultimately there's no right answer for any one thing. It's just staying open to the change, to what's coming, listening hard, and trying new things.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, you know, if I think to pre-pandemic, the many real estate events that we host around the country every year, when placemaking gets talked about on panels at events that I've been to, it's usually around placemaking as an economic driver, right? And that's still very much touched on here. But what I think is so interesting as a new, or at the very least larger entrant to that conversation, is a need for placemaking for our own collective sanity. I mean, Ivy, you mentioned, you know, we're all ready to slam our computers in the trash. Like, every single Zoom I jump on, doesn't matter who I'm talking to, where in America I'm talking to somebody, you know, we're all just, I think we're all a lot more aware of how much we don't just want, but need to be around other people. And, you know, if there can be a silver lining out of these last 15 months, I think that appreciation of being around others is certainly there. I don't know about you all. Maybe it's just because I've been working from this home office for 15 straight months and driving my all of every day. But you know, it's an interesting thing to be conscious of. So with the federal government, right? The American Rescue Plan Act, there's a lot of funding allocated to local recovery efforts. And I would love to hear from you all around some of the factors that you think communities should be paying closest attention to when deciding where or how to allocate those funds. There's a lot of money coming, right? So I'd love to hear you each kind of talk a little bit about how to decide where that money goes.
So I'm going to jump in real quick, and then Norman for sure has the breadth and depth of this.
I love that we're mixing up order, Ivy. I'm into it. We don't have to just keep going around in that same loop. I appreciate you doing it.
Okay. So what I would say is the thing that is the most interesting to me and the most challenging to me is accessing the funds for the people who need them the most is not always clear. And having that middle person, entity, or whatever to connect the dots, some people figure it, obviously some people figure it out because there's a lot of people getting a hold of money, but I'm not sure that all people are able to access all the funds they need in the right ways or even know that they exist. That is still a difficult place. As much as people have access funds, so many stories of people who tried to access funds, got denied from funds, didn't know that there were funds. That still occurs, even with the amount of people who do know, who have figured that out. And so I still think that that's a place where we need work, whoever the we is.
You brought up a great point, and quite frankly, one of the roles that we've played throughout the pandemic is we provided, along with our city partners, technical assistance to small business so that they could move through the PPP channels, so they could move through the idle issues, so that they could have the level of sophistication and relationships to then engage in the transactions. And I think what we found the most is there is a digital divide that the pandemic laid bare also, not just for small businesses, but BIPOC communities overall, in that if a kid did not have internet at their home, they're not going to be able to participate in virtual school. It's the same thing with a small business. If they didn't have the sophistication or the relationship with their bankers, you're not going to get the PPP loan. And I think what we found here is, and what this was moving us towards, is we needed to have bespoke solutions for our stakeholders. They hit different buckets, and we're going to have to be able to provide what those stakeholders need to get to the resource. I think, and more than just at that transactional level, Ivy, the other thing that I think is important at this time is, with this tranche of money that's coming from the federal government, should be about transformation. The money should be engaged in the community. Community members should be engaged. I know for the city of New Orleans, there is advisory committees that are going to look at how this money should be expended in their view, and having all the stakeholders at the table. But from my perspective, this is the moment where we engage in transformation with this level of capital that's going to come in. And we look at, through best practices, through trends, from where we see workforce moving, how AI will impact our industries. I think this is the moment where we make that bet. And all the communities now have the capital stack to make that bet on what they think the best future is for their community, based upon all the best available information right now. And so that's my hope, that we're able to see with this infusion, this one-time infusion from our federal government, that it is able to fund transformation in the community in a different way.
And I think one of the things I'm seeing, and I think for a lot of communities that we're working with, excitement, but a little bit of confusion and uncertainty about what they're going to do with this money, what the responsibilities will be. So the Treasury's provided a lot more guidance now on that in the process. I think that there's accountability baked into it. And I think as you get past the first tranche and get to the second one, I think people are going to find out that accountability was important. But the other thing that's interesting to me, you know, I think we're going to see some people build bridges to nowhere and take moonshots that don't matter, you know, and we'll have monuments to their folly that were attempts at placemaking or investments in things and infrastructure that just didn't matter. I think the key is don't overlook the small stuff, don't overlook the fundamentals. So for people in our audience that are maybe in smaller and mid-sized communities and townships, you know, take care of some of the basic infrastructure that assists the businesses and better connects neighborhoods, better connects the people in your community, because that's what creates value and that's what attracts people and keeps people.
You know, Chris, I'd be curious, kind of expand on that point. You know, at this stage, I think everyone's just so eager to be doing things, right? And I could see scenarios where it's tempting or enticing, you know, to just kind of pursue first development opportunities that present themselves. You know, that might not turn out to be the best thing to do for communities long term. And I'm curious from your seat, how you think communities can or should be using data to determine which development opportunities are the right fit, which things are going to be sustainability, which things are going to be sustainable, you know, which endeavors you know, are going to be best for communities long term.
Yeah, I think the information, data, insight that you can utilize, anything that helps you understand. It's almost as if it's a divining rod, you know, kind of provide some direction. When you've got multiple options, a million different directions you can go, you know, what do you do? I think the thing that you've got to do is look at it and what's going to provide the most benefit, and not just make the biggest splash immediately, but be sustainable. And not sustainable, not that I'm against sustainability in the green environmental sense, but sustainable from a business and community sense, something that's going to provide lasting value, foreseeable value, something that's going to provide services back to your community. There's my little dog. All right. Anyway, those types of things. I think anything that you can do, because you know this is the funds that are available and the opportunities. I think that people shouldn't lose sight of risk. The risk here is squandering the opportunity. Data is best used to tamp down risk, clarify, get a little more certainty. Nothing can be absolutely certain. Right. And then understand and be able to track what's going on. So anytime you're looking at a business investment, anytime you're looking at business infrastructure, how do we attract, how do we retain businesses, expand businesses? Just understanding the market conditions and being able at a community level to speak as though you know the same language as that business you're working with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just think of, you know, Norman touching on, you know, the critical need for New Orleans to reinvigorate and kickstart the hospitality sector. Makes a ton of sense. You know, and at the same time, I think of, feels like every time I speak to someone in real estate in California, no matter what we're talking about, the conversation eventually is going to shift to the need for more housing, right? Like place by place, there are just things that are needed. And, you know, anything that you, Norman, or you, Ivy, like to add about, you know, kind of how to decide, you know, what the right things are to pursue, I'd love to hear that.
Miles, one of the things that has been, New Orleans is a city of water. I mean, we have our port, which is one of our greatest assets, the river, and our lake, which supports our seafood industry. But we also have to manage the water. And I think part of what we would want to be able to do is create our infrastructure and our jobs and our training about how we manage our water here. And that's an infrastructure issue, and it's going to be an issue that we have to become excellent at, because then it impacts our ability to have development and tramp down some of the risk of outside capital to engage in Orleans Parish in a substantive way. And I think to Chris's point, my hope is that this tranche of money is the catalyst for other money that can be leveraged, and that we show that we have a strategy and a plan that takes all of our strategic strengths, acknowledges our weaknesses and our threats, but engages the capital markets and the opportunity that we can be in our community that will drive all of the economic development metrics that we all want to have: jobs created, jobs retained. But I think some of the things that Chris talked to, but to create the sense of place that has security and growth and opportunity embedded in it. And that's what's going to be the return for the money that is coming in, not just through the federal government, but from the taxpayers' use of, their sales tax or their use tax, and then leveraging any other opportunity zone, any other outside investment, so that it is a holistic approach to economic development. And it shows that this community is ready to galvanize about something that is different and unique to this moment, and it will project out what our future can be.
So, kind of along these lines, Norman, one of the things that came up in conversation prior to us jumping on with the audience here is, the topic of designing strategies that foster inclusivity. And so I'd love to give you an opportunity just to talk a little bit about programs you've implemented and how you've used data to support initiatives, again, to foster inclusivity in New Orleans.
One of the things, Miles, as trying to jumpstart or re-engage our restaurateurs, our small businesses, because what we saw was the federal money was coming, but we needed to have an extra boost. So with our city partners, we set up the Resilient Corridor Initiative, which was a program that was isolating specific commercial corridors, businesses within those corridors, to give them a small infusion of working capital that helped them transition during the pandemic, but also technical assistance in a bespoke manner that spoke to how can you grow your individual business. And we, quite frankly, we utilized a lot of our Buxton data. We had site analysis, consumer analysis, to give these small businesses the type of data horsepower that is required to market and grow. We believe that New Orleans is 80% small businesses. We're driven by small businesses. We're going to have to execute our play. We might not have the home runs, but we're going to hit our singles and our doubles. And if we can grow businesses through our Invest NOLA program, our Build NOLA mobilization fund, if we can grow businesses from 1 million to 10 million, we may grow that business from 10 jobs to 20 jobs. And that's how we can start stacking the successes one transaction at a time in a repeatable, sustainable fashion. And I believe that program in this particular moment reinforced our business model: talent attraction, business retention and attraction, small business ecosystem development, strategic neighborhood development. That's, to your point, Chris, building those plays, the not the sexy work, but the basic, hard, repeatable work. And if we can do that in a fashion that augments our restaurant, our hospitality industry, and then moves into what I'm hopeful for our emerging Black tech sector in our community, the emergence of businesses in the sweet spot between $1 million and $10 million, that's when we can start to hammer home the sustainability and have the value proposition of all that data analysis that has been so helpful for us to get to this point, but then to bring exponential growth to these businesses.
Ivy, something I want to ask you. I mean, your firm, Bedrock, I mean, has played a huge role in revitalizing Detroit and Cleveland, right? And I'm curious, if you've got lessons learned or tips or a wish list, things that you would encourage city leaders and other communities who are hoping to collaborate with private sector firms like yours, to do.
Well, I'm going to just echo everything that Norman just said. It's it's working with people, and it's one thing at a time, working with government, with all the funds that are coming in to build infrastructure. It's a combination of building infrastructure and then continuing to teach people how to fish, right? Because that's what Norman was describing. Let's not hand out dollars and then they go out the door. It's all about one business at a time. And so that may take some of the funds that come in the door, but it's also building the infrastructure. And the infrastructure is everything from roads and technology to schools and to all the things that cities need, because both Norman and I are in the heart of cities. I know that Chris covers all kinds of, products, suburban and all of that. And Norman and I are highly focused on cities. So in order to make sure that we're growing, and that whether it's BIPOC and non-BIPOC, like everybody in our cities, it does mean a combination of both, building infrastructure and teaching people how to fish. So I'm just echoing everything Norman just said, just with different words. But I'm wholeheartedly in agreement with everything that Norman just said.
As we kind of approach the end of our time here, and this conversation has flown by for me, I'm so grateful the opportunity to join this conversation, and to all of you for joining and being so open and candid. But for those listening right now, I'd be curious to have each of you offer either a big idea to consider or a big piece of advice to keep in mind as we all move forward into these kind of next chapters in the late stages and then hopefully aftermath of this pandemic. I'm stalling a little bit to give you each an opportunity to think, but whoever's ready first, love either a big idea or a big piece of advice for folks watching to keep in mind going forward.
Yeah, I think my big piece of advice, which probably is not going to be that dissimilar from Norman's or Chris's or maybe even yours, is that we have got to stay focused on small business. It's easy to talk to the big tenants who are well capitalized and all of that, but small business is the heart of our country, and they have gone a bit by the wayside. And the pandemic may be a way to help reset, because at the end of the day, we don't make a lot of money until we get to the small businesses. That's really the driver of what we do. And so my advice is, as things get better and all of that stuff, you need to still stay focused on small business. No matter what product type you're dealing with, no matter what sector, I think that will be what drives us forward and keeps us going. The creative entrepreneurs, to the people who put these things into place to operate the businesses, to bring any service or product to market.
How about Chris, Norman? Thanks, Ivy.
Miles, from my perspective, look, I've hammered small business, but I'm going to take a tack that what I want to make sure that we focus on from this moment is innovation. If I would want to make sure that I do not want us to lose this moment and settle back to the security of what was. I really want to be able to look at this through the lens of what it can be, what we want it to be, and utilize, our data and our analysis and make our best interpretation of what tomorrow is and go for it. And I think if we make that journey, as what Ivy said, with the knowledge and understanding that we're going for this collectively together, and that's one community at a time, one small business at a time, look, one shared vision. And I think that's the biggest thing that I'm hopeful that this moment will give us, is that shared vision and unity of purpose in our community that drives prosperity, economic development, inclusion, and opportunity for all of our citizens. And I think that's where I've been excited about, because we've moved past what I call the trauma. And now we're starting to focus on what we want this to be and get an agreement upon strategy, and let's innovate to the new tomorrow. That's what I really would want to leave everybody with.
Chris, no pressure, but by all means.
Well, I think I share a lot of Norman's thoughts there and Ivy's as well. Like for me, I think the big takeaway for everybody, and I think the mindset here is locally answer the question, how can we be better, right? How can we be better? And looking at your community in terms of not being not transactional but transformational, building place. I mean, that's the big takeaway from me. Do something transformational. And again, that doesn't mean take the big moonshot. That doesn't matter. That doesn't mean build the bridge to nowhere, because that little stuff is hard, but it's been missing for so long. And that's what's been amplified over the past year, is that the little stuff was not right. The little stuff was not equitable. The little stuff was not strong enough to build a foundation for people to prosper. And that's what we got to fix.
Well, look, I think that is a phenomenal note to wrap on. So once again, I want to say a big thank you to Ivy, to Norman, to Chris for the candor and insight today. This has been a lot of fun for me. And to the entire Buxton team for putting this on. Again, every step of this process has been fun and incredibly well organized. And I am very grateful to have had the opportunity to participate. I will, if anyone has any questions to follow up on, certainly encourage you to write in and follow up. And if I can be helpful to anyone on this conversation or anyone watching at home, by all means, reach out. I see nodding heads, so I think we've all got that in common. Thank you all. Really, really appreciate the time.
Thanks, Miles. Thanks for doing this as well. And thank you to Buxton and Norman and Chris.
Hey, I echo the same. With a great panel, great opportunity to share and learn. And I think that's what I'm grateful for this panel and this opportunity with.
And Miles, Ivy, and Norman, I have done a lot of webinars over the past year. And this is my favorite one. I really appreciate the conversation, and what I like most about it is not just the quality people, but the hopeful message. And we're turning a corner. And I think there's a lot to learn from both you and Ivy, Norman. Both you, Ivy, and Norman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot more smiles on screen than we had 12 months ago, right? That's a good sign, right? We'll keep building on it.
It is.
Got it.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Be well.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.